February 13th, 2017. 1:35 p.m. Delphi, Indiana. A postcard-perfect town of 3,000, where the cornfields meet the woods, and crime is a headline you read about from somewhere else. On this unseasonably warm Monday, two best friends, Abigail Williams, age 13, with a smile that could light up a room, and Libby German, age 14, tech-savvy and fiercely loyal, are dropped off at the head of the Monon High Bridge Trail. It's a day off from school. Freedom. They plan to walk the trails, maybe cross the towering, skeletal remains of the old railroad bridge, a local rite of passage that's both thrilling and dangerous. The bridge is a monster of decaying timber and rusted steel, standing 60 feet above Deer Creek. They are teenagers, alive in the world, snapping photos and sharing them on Snapchat, their laughter echoing through the bare winter trees. At 2:07 p.m., Libby German posts a final, fleeting image to her story. It shows her friend, Abby, a tiny figure against a vast sky, walking the treacherous, widely spaced railroad ties of the abandoned bridge. It is the last photo ever taken of them alive. The clock ticks past 3 p.m. They are late. 3:11 p.m. A text message lights up Libby's phone, now lying silent somewhere in the leaves. Where are you? Calls go unanswered. Texts are delivered, but never read. The first prickle of anxiety becomes a cold knot of dread. By 5:30 p.m., as the Indiana sky bleeds into twilight, the families are at the trails, their voices growing more desperate with each passing minute. Abby. Libby. The calls are swallowed by the gathering dark. Flashlights pierce the gloom, sweeping over frozen creek beds and thick underbrush. The search is called off for the night, the terror now a physical weight on every heart. The next morning, February 14th, Valentine's Day, the official search resumes with a grim determination. At 12:15 p.m., a searcher's cry cuts through the cold air. Near the banks of Deer Creek, a half-mile from the monstrous bridge, they find them. The bodies of Abby and Libby. The town of Delphi isn't just shattered, its innocence is murdered. The killer isn't a phantom from out of town. He is here. He has walked these same streets. He has shopped in these same stores. He is among them. And the police have a secret they cannot share. A digital time bomb ticking in their evidence locker. The investigation that follows is immense, a tidal wave of tips and leads, but it is navigated by a single, classified piece of evidence. What the desperate public sees weeks later is a first sketch of a suspect released in July 2017. A man with a driving cap and a coarse goatee, his eyes cold and empty. They hear a chilling, isolated audio clip, extracted from a longer recording, down the hill. The voice is calm, authoritative, chillingly casual. But what they don't know, what the police hold back as their sacred, secret weapon, is the full, breathtaking extent of Libby German's heroism. As the man approached them on that high bridge, as he closed the distance, Libby's fear was overridden by a stunning instinct to document. Her thumb activated the video recorder on her phone. She slid it into her pocket, the lens peeking out, capturing it all. The crunch of gravel underfoot. The rustle of his jacket. For 43 seconds, the phone records not just his voice, but a blurry, hauntingly slow-motion video of bridge guy walking across the creosote-soaked ties of the bridge, his head down, his hands in his pockets. This grainy footage is the case's Rosetta Stone, its holy grail. The FBI and Indiana State Police guard it with ferocious intensity, a master key used to lock out hundreds of false confessions and sift through the avalanche of over 50,000 tips. It is their truth machine. But this crucial evidence also creates a suffocating mystery of its own. Why, in April 2019, at a press conference that feels more like a funeral, does the sketch change so dramatically? The goateed man is gone, replaced by a new face, a much younger, clean-shaven man with curly hair and a blank, youthful expression. The change is jarring, a seismic shift that fractures public trust. Police state, in a tense announcement, that the second sketch is now the main focus, and that the killer might be hiding in plain sight. They reveal another sliver of audio, another command from the ghost, guys. The message is confusing, a paradox. Are there two suspects? Was the first sketch a secondary accomplice, or simply a witness they had mistakenly focused on for 2 years? The code of the investigation is cracking under the weight of expectation, the pressure building to a deafening roar. Online sleuths descend, dissecting every frame, every pixel, accusing innocent men and tearing families apart in a digital witch hunt. The shadow over Delphi grows longer and darker. Then, a silent break, a shift in the digital current. A multi-year forensic effort, a relentless digital archaeology sifting through that mountain of tips, finally connects a thread. It leads investigators to an unassuming local man, a CVS pharmacy technician, a man who has blended into the fabric of Delphi his entire life. A man whose name, Richard Matthew Allen, had actually been in the tip pile since the very beginning. A single card in a massive deck, but had somehow been misfiled, overlooked, lost in the chaos. For 5 years, he processed family photos, sold cigarettes, and stocked shelves, all while the posters of Abby and Libby stared down from the bulletin boards in the very town he called home. October 26, 2022. In a move that shocks the nation, police descend on a small house on Country Club Road. Richard Matthew Allen, 50, is taken into custody, charged with 2 counts of murder. He is one of them. He has walked among them for 5 years. He has handled their prescriptions, their family photos, their daily lives. The collective relief is palpable, a scream of catharsis after 2,078 days of agony. But it is short-lived, smothered by a new, bureaucratic silence. The arrest is only the beginning of a deeper, more complex mystery. The probable cause affidavit, the document explaining why they arrested him, is immediately sealed by a judge. The entire case file is placed under an unprecedented, suffocating gag order. The public and press are completely locked out, left to stare at the blank walls of the justice system. Why the extreme secrecy? What is in that document that is so explosive, so potentially damaging, that it must be hidden from the very community that lived this nightmare? Does it point to accomplices? Does it reveal a botched early investigation? Or does it contain crime scene details so horrific they must be buried forever? The legal system has now encoded the case in a new, incomprehensible language, one of sealed motions, disputed evidence, and frantic, behind-the-scenes maneuvering. The defense attorneys claim Allen is being framed, that the discovery process is a mess, that something is terribly, terribly wrong. The prosecution fights to keep everything hidden, speaking of an ongoing and complex investigation. The families of Abby and Libby sit in court, watching a legal battle they can barely understand. The promise of justice now tangled in a web of procedure and secrecy. The simple, horrifying image of a man on a bridge has been replaced by the impenetrable facade of a court document stamped confidential. The arrest of Richard Allen was not an ending. It was a beginning of a legal labyrinth more twisted and shrouded in shadow than the woods where Abby and Libby took their last breaths. For the families and the battered soul of Delphi, the dizzying relief of an arrest curdled into a new, more complex agony. The agony of silence, of black-barred documents, and of a justice system that seemed to be consuming itself from the inside out. The monster was named, but the mystery had only deepened, mutating into a legal horror story. The first crack in the state's flawless facade appeared not with a whisper, but with a seismic roar. In a legal maneuver that sent shockwaves through the true crime world, Allen's original court-appointed attorneys, Bradley Rossi and Andrew Baldwin, filed a 136-page memorandum. This was not merely a defense, it was a narrative detonation. They painted a picture not of a lone wolf, but of a dark, orchestrated ritual. They alleged a crime scene staged by a pagan, Odinist cult. They pointed to sticks and branches arranged in specific, unnatural, runic patterns around the girls' bodies. A signature, they argued, that pointed not to a meek pharmacy tech, but to a group of fanatics operating with impunity. The prosecution's entire case, built so meticulously on a single unspent .40 caliber round found between the victims, a round forensically linked to Allen's SIG Sauer pistol, was, according to the defense, a grand and desperate frame job. A move to pin an unsolvable, occult crime on a convenient patsy and finally quiet the 5-year roar of public pressure. The memo was a ghost story woven from legal parchment, and it seeped out of the sealed records, terrifying a public that had believed the monster was already safely in a cage. The judge's response was swift, public, and brutal. In a hearing on October 19, 2023, that felt more like an execution than a procedure, she forced Baldwin and Rosie to withdraw from the case. The reason was a scandal that shook the legal community to its core. Crime scene photos, the most sacred and horrific evidence, had been leaked from Baldwin's office to the hosts of a sensationalist true crime podcast. The families of the victims, who had already endured the unimaginable, now had to endure the violation of their daughter's final moments being broadcast for entertainment. The community watched, aghast, as the two attorneys who had fought most fiercely for their client, who had dared to suggest a terrifying conspiracy, were publicly cast out and shamed. Richard Allen was left functionally defenseless, a pawn seemingly abandoned on the board. But the fight was not over. In a stunning legal Hail Mary that reads like a Hollywood script, the disgraced attorneys fought back. Months later, after a dramatic challenge that went all the way to the Indiana Supreme Court, the judge was forced to reverse her own decision. She had to reinstate them. The court had been caught in its own error. The legal battle was no longer just about guilt or innocence. It was a metadrama, a circus of catastrophic errors and accusations that threatened to bury the truth about Abby and Libby under an avalanche of procedural chaos and judicial pride. The quest for justice now had a second, equally important question. Could the system even handle the weight of this case? And through it all, the man at the center of the storm sat in a 6 by 10-foot cell at the Westville Correctional Facility. Reports from his new defense team painted a picture of profound deterioration. They claimed he was living in squalor, under suicide watch, eating pured food, and losing touch with reality, his mind crumbling under the pressure of isolation and the enormity of the charges against him. Was this the man on the bridge? The calm, authoritative voice that said, "Down the hill"? Or was he a broken, pathetic pawn in a much larger, darker game? The clear image of the monster began to blur and distort, replaced by the pitiable image of a frail man in an orange jumpsuit, and the much more terrifying possibility that the real evil was still out there, watching, hidden by the very confusion it had sown. But the evidence. Always, the evidence. This was the bedrock the prosecution returned to, the anchor in the storm of conspiracy theories and legal theatrics. That single unspent round, cycled through Allen's gun but never fired, placed him at the scene. It was a silent, metallic witness that could not be cross-examined. And then, the human witnesses. At least 3 separate individuals placed a man matching Richard Allen's description on the trails that day, muddy, bloody, and dressed in the same blue jacket and jeans as Bridge Guy. They saw him, and he saw them. He walked past them, a ghost already receding into the trees, his face grimly set, his clothes telling a story of violent struggle. But the heart of the case, its tragic, brilliant, and horrifying core, remained Libby German's phone. The full, unredacted video, seen only by the investigators and the court, is said to be far longer and more devastating than the public can ever be allowed to know. It doesn't just show a man on a bridge. It is a snuff film recorded by its own victim, a document of pure evil. It is the ultimate testimony from a voice that was silenced. It is the reason the state is fighting with such ferocity to keep the details sealed, to protect the sanctity of the girl's memory and the integrity of their case from the ghoulish, insatiable curiosity of the world. It is the reason they believe, beyond any conceivable doubt, that the man they arrested on that October day is the man on the bridge. The story of Delphi is no longer a simple whodunit. It is a how. How did this happen in the heart of a trusting community? How did a simple walk in the woods unravel into a national tragedy? How does a justice system navigate a case so horrific it threatens to break its own rules? The search for Abby and Libby's killer became a search for meaning in meaningless violence, and then a desperate, blood-knuckled battle to hold a system together as it threatened to fly apart at the seams. The code has been cracked, a man sits in a cell, but the final line of this story has yet to be written. The trial awaits, promising a final, painful unveiling. And with it, the desperate hope that after all the secrets, all the pain, and all the noise, 2 words will finally be spoken with finality to the man in the defendant's chair, guilty. Here at Crimes Uncoded, we're not just telling crime stories. We're breaking down the legal codes that define them, The sealed affidavits, the disputed evidence, the battle between defense and prosecution. This is where the real story of justice often lives, in the cold, hard text of the law. Make sure to subscribe, because next up, the perfect murder and the law that couldn't touch it.